Welcome to Depth of Field, a Around the Lens panel discussion. We're talking about covering COVID. I'm Bruce Byers, photographer out of New York City. My panel today is Traci, Westcott, Brittainy Newman, and William Schneider. We're all RIT graduates, and William is an RIT instructor. We're all photographers, and we'd like to talk today about covering COVID. And I would like to open up the floor first to William, who I've known for many, many, many years, and a great photographer and a great teacher of journalism. William, can you give me some insights here as to what the school is dealing with and how you're teaching now these days?
Well, COVID has presented us with a lot of different challenges, not only in delivering the classroom work, teaching. How do you teach photography in distance if that's what we have to do? And then more challenges for the students to how do you have them go out and tell visual stories when actually getting with people could be potentially deadly. So what we did last spring is we kind of shut everything down and went online, and we had our students do more things like this, where they would interview multiple people in different locations and put together those people's stories. We would interview them over Zoom, or we would give them recording equipment and they would do diaries, or we would do interviews with them, and the students would piece those together. And we ended up building a website where all the students and some of the faculty even were put their stories up to talk about the early days of COVID. And then as the summer went on and things loosened up a little bit, as people got more and more comfortable with it and understood, we came back in the fall and we gave our students a lot of guidelines on how to cover it, how to photograph in shall we say, delicate situations to protect both themselves and their subjects. We didn't tell any student that they had to go out and make photos in the COVID world, keeping in mind that in the fall, we had the protests here in Rochester, just like you did in many, many other places. So that presented a whole other set of complications because of COVID. So basically what we did was we talked to the students about social distancing. We talked to them about, not only wearing masks, but being doubly sure, many of them doubled up on masks, and sort of told them and worked with them on how to approach stories a little bit differently, to be intimate yet not physically intimate. And we ended up with quite a few good things. And also a lot of the students went out to cover the protests. Those weren't as bad as indoor places because they were outside. There was constant movement, there was air, the whole 9 yards. But everybody was very, very cautious about how they did their work. I'm happy to say that I believe only one of our students tested positive, and she got that, shall we say, from other activities and not from making any pictures out in the world at all. And in general, RIT only had less than 100 cases from student, faculty, and staff. And again, as I said, in the photography school in particular, there were very, very, very few cases, and no one was hospitalized. So it's been a challenge, but our students met it and still went and did their work. And from what it sounds like this semester, they're going to get out and do even more. Again, being very, very cautious.
That sounds great. That sounds great. So I would love to hear from Traci and Brittainy, and I believe they're going to be showing some of their work that they've been doing. Have you been in touch with their projects? I'm sure you've been in touch with them, but have you been in touch with their projects? Have they, as getting an assignment, are they doing it on their own, or are they coming back and saying, hey, getting some guidance from you. How are you dealing with your alumni, I guess is what I'm saying.
Well, I mean, these ladies are pros now, in their relatively short pro career, they've done very, very well. Traci is a staffer in Minnesota, and Brittainy is a freelancer in New York City. Is it safe to say that a majority of your freelance work is with the New York Times? Yeah. So,
And I just signed a contract with AP about a month ago. So.
Well, there you go.
Excellent.
So between the two of them, they don't come to me for much advice anymore. And not that they ever did that much to begin with. They're both very, very good and exceptional visual storytellers. And but seriously, they've been doing a lot of really, really good work. And I would, and I think it's fair for them to present it to you and talk about that and their process. Brittainy, well, both of them like to work on their own a lot. And I think that's a good thing. So.
Well, that's the typical photographer, give them the world and they stand in a corner with nobody. So Traci, take it away. Let's see what you got.
Sure. So I'm Traci. I'm a digital content producer in Rochester, Minnesota, actually, for the Post Bulletin, and we're owned by Forum Communications Company. So I think my take's a little bit different because I have the community journalism day by day, daily kind of work, and not so much the, in the trenches, so to speak. We do have Mayo Clinic here, but access issues have been always something that we've kind of struggled with them. And we got in once so far. So something to continue to work for and strive for, but I think everyone is having a lot of those issues. So another thing to note is that we didn't really get hit very hard. So we've only had, 6,000 cases in Minnesota as a state since, March. So a lot fewer than what you guys are seeing in New York City. But we kind of are still dealing with all of the precautionary measures and those kind of things. So I can start by sharing my screen here.
Do you find that when you guys walk into a situation, a group of people or indoor, that they're telling you to get safe, or are you so safe as you walk in that there's no need to tell people to put your masks on and all that? I mean, how do you approach the scenarios that you have to do?
I would say that we pretty much, as a newsroom, have a standard of going into everything masked. And we also have a opt-out button kind of thing. If there's any assignment that we just feel it's not safe, it's a discussion with our editors. And right now, we have to ask to go into houses and that kind of thing. It's more of a discussion. And so there's a lot more on the planning end of things, a lot more phone calls, a lot more interviews over the phone before you're doing things, that kind of thing. So that when you actually are in a, inside space with someone, you're not taking up the time for an interview and that kind of thing. You're in and out. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep, that's great. Yep.
Okay. So this was like right in the beginning. This was March 16th of last year. So kind of like the community's response right away. People went to libraries and started literally emptying the shelves, kind of like the toilet paper crisis. Our library was, not completely empty, but it was pretty bare within the first day after they announced that schools were going to be distance learning. So this young lady grabbed, between her and her family, I think they had something like 85 library items before they left. So kind of just, again, like community journalism out there, what is happening in our city that's, noteworthy, I guess.
Yeah, but after a year, have you asked them for their nickel per day?
Well, our library's back open now, but this is also like when we didn't know what this was. And you can see no masks because it's, you know, right in the beginning kind of thing. This is an image I made when I was just going to the grocery store. This was about 2 weeks into schools not having in-person learning. And I found these two families and I was wondering what they were doing in the parking lot, and the kids were just having a conversation out of their sunroofs. It's kind of one of those moments where you're like, glad I had my camera with me. But again, it's just, you know, like really sharing how these little kids feel and trying to do it safely again.
How much permission are you asking of people more now, or is it just accepted that the people are allowing you to take pictures?
Yeah, I mean, I think between COVID and the political state that we're in, there's definitely more hesitancy when you're kind of out and about. Especially, I mean, Rochester, Minnesota is a city of just over 100,000, so it's a small city. And it's when you're kind of doing features and looking out, you know, for daily images, I tend to find myself introducing myself way further, like way before I would normally, and kind of getting a feel for how they are, and, you know, are they going to let me on their property? Is it, you know, so I definitely take it with a little bit more, you know, caution than I would in the past, you know. So this is mid-March. This is a family that had a daycare. So this is when we started to really kind of understand that it was, you know, pretty deadly, and that people needed to change how they were living their lives. So this is a mom and a daughter, and the little one, Cora Jean, has a lymph disorder. And so you can see her hands are fairly swollen, but that also affects her immune system. And so the mom was running a daycare out of her home, and she had to shut it down to protect her daughter, and kind of opened up a whole book of worms as far as how they're going to get paid and all of that stuff. As far as shooting the photograph, I didn't have any contact with them because I was being, you know, very safe as far as the little one was concerned. And I didn't, you know, this was right in the beginning still, didn't really know exactly what we were working with. So I kind of, this was part of a whole series that I did of window portraits of people that were more at risk. So I photographed.
I think it's great that you calling it window portraits, that you included the window, because normally you probably would have just taken a picture of them, and the window is kind of putting it in a place in history. You know, it's the window's there because of COVID.
It's showing that barrier. Yeah. And I think that you see a lot of portraits shot through windows this time, and it gets old fast because it's hard to get creative when you can't, you know, really, you know, you have a window in front of you and you have to do that. So,
right.
Yeah, this was a series I did, just a couple of families that had immune disorders, and some of them were older and some of them were younger, and just kind of really like starting to get out there and make some work with the restrictions. So kind of still like a timid approach, but like I was just trying to feel out, you know, are people wanting to still have human contact, and how far can I go with being safe, obviously. And so this picture was about 2 months in, and our senior living centers had kind of been on lockdown. And so it's a picture of an older resident waving to a daycare member, and she's got a sign that says, "We believe in you." And I found this assignment, and I wasn't exactly sure what I was gonna kind of like, you know, walk into, like most cases. And this is when I think emotionally everything hit me, because this old lady reminded me of my grandma, and I'm just, you know, thinking like, holy cow, I get to still, you know, have the privilege in a way of going out and seeing people, and you kind of just forget a little bit about what everyone else is going through.
No.
And so, yeah, the daycare visited the staff through the windows, so, or the residents through the windows. And this is another image that I made at the same senior living facility. Kind of just for me represents, you know, what is happening here. Here we have these people that are like locked in their rooms, and, you know, they get minimal contact. And just to see how happy the residents were to see like a human face outside their window, it was an assignment I don't think I'll ever forget. And then shifting kind of into just the sports world, all of our sports were canceled. So trying to figure out, that was the majority of my job description before COVID hit. And so I was used to working nights and covering high school sports every single day. And so they kind of just cut it off, and it like no sports. And so this was Be the Light MN hashtag trend, I guess you could say, where the stadiums turned on their lights for a couple of minutes just to honor everyone that, you know, working on the front lines, but also the kids that are missing out on their senior sports years and that kind of thing. So I went out with one of the smaller towns here and photographed them turning on their stadium lights for a couple minutes. And it's just an empty field, kind of signifies like, you know, what's happening. Oops. So this photo is actually my neighborhood is just out for a walk, and this guy in the dino suit is called the Quarantineosaurus, and he decided he was gonna kind of get out and cheer up the neighborhood. Again, this is in April, and we're still not really, you know, seeing the effects like New York City is. And so we have all of the lockdown precautions in place, but none of the real world, I guess, you know, our ICU units are still doing fine and all of that. And then here's Pence, and he visited Mayo Clinic. It kind of went viral because he didn't wear a mask in Mayo Clinic. So we weren't actually allowed to go in because of their precautions that they have in place for the public. But this was him just greeting like the nurses outside, kind of thing. Am I going too fast? Is this
No, that's great. It's great. Okay. You're doing great.
And then graduation season kind of rolled around, and students weren't allowed to have any kind of graduation. So I found these 3 kids who actually lived together and were graduating from University of Minnesota, Rochester. And they sat out in their courtyard, and they live streamed their graduation service and or ceremony. And, you know, they celebrated just the 3 of them. So that was kind of fun to be a part of. And then we have working from home when you have young kids. So this is a teacher and her son who has an IEP, and he has issues staying focused. And so this is kind of just one of the parts of her day where he's goofing off underneath the bed, and she's trying to get some work done. And she kind of said, you know, even though she's a teacher, she sees it in a different respect now, because she just realizes how much her son needs that one-on-one time with his teachers. And it's super hard for her to get anything done when she needs to kind of be sitting right there with him.
Right.
And then again, just kind of community camaraderie here. We had a parade going through the town, and a local band decided they were gonna, you know, go parade and play music in the street. And so kind of cool to see how the community responds to things, and like the creativity that surrounds it. And here was the first day of school, students learning how to social distance. And again, we weren't allowed in the school, but they all met with their previous year teachers before to kind of, you know, get them all organized for the day, especially with little ones. It's kind of hard. And they were the first group to do hybrid learning because they are a 15 and 45 school. So they go more, this was midsummer when they started on their first day instead of in September. And again, learning from home. This little guy, James, he and his family moved here from Seattle, and they actually took this quarantine time to switch to homeschooling. Distance learning, just as soon as they started, they knew distance learning wasn't going to work. James has ADHD, and his sister also has some learning disabilities, and they basically, after a little bit of distance learning, were like, we can't do this. They picked up their stuff, they moved across the country, and they came here so they were closer to their family, and they officially switched the kids into homeschooling. So this is just me spending some time with them, kind of doing a science experiment in their backyard. And sports finally started to resume again, but we didn't have, no fans were allowed. And so kind of figuring out that if we even can be in there, a lot of times they'll send you up into the bleachers and make you shoot from no man's land, and you can't move and you can't talk to anyone and that kind of thing. So trying to figure out what the actual rules are for each school and how they are dealing with this. There's a lot of like logistics that go into it. We have to call the athletic director before every game, and we have to make sure that, you know, sometimes I get my temperature checked. Sometimes I have to stand a certain place. Sometimes they don't let me, you know, it's like nothing ever happened. And then a last image of just being in school with a teacher who's, you know, doing a Zoom lesson. This is the first time we were allowed even in the schools. So it's been a lot of access issues, a lot of phone calls to try and prove that, you know, the story is worth it and, you know, we should be there. But again, it's really hard to push back when the school or really anyone says, but COVID, and we have to respect that. And so it's been a fine line of trying to make good images and images that mean something, while also keeping everyone safe.
Yeah, and I find that one of the big things is, you know, you see it as normal, but it's not normal to get it. And you get into that room and I'd like to get 10 feet over there, but you can't. Normally you could jump all over the place. So yeah, do you find it limiting on your documenting, you know, to get the story out? Do you find it that you go, I could have made this better without
Yeah.
COVID? I'm assuming.
Yeah, definitely. And people are like okay with you stopping by for a portrait, but not okay with you being in the house. And if you get in the house, people are okay with you being there for 15 minutes, but not okay with you being there for a couple hours.
Right.
So yeah, it's definitely kind of, you know, closed down a lot of that intimate opportunities for photos and storytelling. I think the other thing to note here is that we had the protest here as well. And so a lot of our coverage from May until honestly September was protest coverage. And that kind of took like 4 months out of, you know, we were now telling a different story within COVID. So I didn't include any of my protest stuff in here. But yeah, a lot of our energy, I guess, as a newsroom was kind of put onto that story that's in our backyard. So.
Well, yeah, it's great. And just the way you handled your images is, even though you just did them, they're very historic. You really mark the time, especially the windows, you know, to have the window with the people in there. It is COVID, you know, and 20 years from now, I think you wouldn't have to talk about it. Which is to me, a great way of recording history and of being a photographer, telling the story when you're so limited, you know, so make sure that everything you can. So that's fantastic. Wonderful work. Did you take anything from, as you're out there shooting, does anything from the past, like when you're at RIT, come into what you're doing now? You know, we were sitting in that class one day and I learned this little button to push, and I've got it on my oh, it works today. I mean, so that I went to school at RIT in 77, and there's little things every now and then I'm out shooting and I relate back to that, which is the wonderful thing.
Yeah, I mean, technically speaking, I would say no, but I would say just life lessons or things that we kind of learn about. Like, I mean, you see here, I don't have any of the photos in the trenches. Like, you see COVID photos and you see ICU nurses. And while that's something we definitely tried for, our community didn't really feel the brunt of this pandemic. And so it's not really, while it's still true to the story, the images I'm showing you, that's true to our community and how our community was locked down. And so in a way you get discouraged because you see like these powerful images coming out of New York City and, all of these things that are happening in your backyard, but on a very, very, lesser scale. And so trying to figure out like, okay, well, how is this impacting my community and how can I show it? And a lot of it was the education part. A lot of it was, just the distance learning, staying at home, figuring that kind of thing out. So I guess, there's stories in your backyard, despite it not being the epicenter of a pandemic. There's still, it's affecting everyone. And so kind of just the community journalism part here is, just out here every day trying to listen to what's happening.
Right. So Brittainy, let's get into the trenches here. Let's get into this hardcore New York City. I think the big difference between where you were, Traci, is that when I went to do my work, I had to walk by portable funeral homes, which are in the back of every hospital. So it reminded you of where we're at. No matter what you shot, you couldn't miss these tractor trailer trucks. So in a way, you avoided that ache that was to me every time I walked by them. But you did show what your community was, so it was great. So Traci, Brittainy, take it away.
Thank you. So thanks for having me on this. It's really nice to see Traci and William. I graduated RIT in 2018 and studied photojournalism. I've had like numerous classes with Traci. We've worked on lots of projects together too. So when coronavirus came to New York, I had just came back from traveling with Mike Bloomberg on his campaign trail. For the Times, I was a year-long photo fellow at the New York Times. So I was basically on assignment every single day, including weekends. I probably worked like 24 days out of the month. And I had just came back from Mike Bloomberg's campaign trail. That was like a 4-day trip traveling to 7 states and 10 cities in 4 days. And 2 positive COVID tests came up in Texas. And that was like the next spot that they were about to go to. And these are like really crowded places that we're going into where he's speaking. And it hadn't hit New York yet. And so I came back to New York, was shooting probably some real estate stuff, some sort of normal things. And then I had to run to this building on 42nd Street that was the first positive COVID person in New York. And it was super weird. The security guards were being super sneaky and wasn't letting anyone come through. And it was just a very eerie scene. And after that day, the whole photo team at the Times had a massive conference call talking about PPE, how this will be the biggest story of our lifetime, probably, all this stuff. And we had literally every single photographer and photo editor on this call. And so it was super serious. And then a couple days after that, I had a really, really bad cough, and I was feeling a tightness in my chest, and all of a sudden I couldn't smell or taste anything. So I immediately texted my manager and editor saying I think I have coronavirus. But at this time there was no test available. I was freaking out because I didn't know how long this was gonna last. I thought I was never gonna shoot again. This is such a big historical moment, and studying photojournalism, I wanted to be documenting this in any way I can. And so let me share my screen. And so during this very beginning time, I wasn't able to go out at all. And I also live in a 1-bedroom with my mom in Manhattan. And so my photo editor asked me if I would be open to being part of this project called the Still Lives Project, which is basically like personal photo essay that a whole but like 15 photographers did, including Eugene Richards, which William is like the person who introduced me to Eugene Richards. And I've gone to like so many of his talks and stuff. So I was like super excited to be and like honored to be like amongst this like list of photographers. So my first like sort of coronavirus-based project was documenting what my quarantine looked like. So this is my house. I just moved to my first apartment in Tudor City, so I no longer live with my mom. But my mom works as a professional clown, so we have like tons of like clown stuff and all this stuff. So I had to eat separately in separate rooms. And the last time I took self-portraits of myself, like seriously, was when I was a senior in high school. And so this photo actually won like Year in Pictures, which was cool. And also kind of crazy because like the whole world will end up seeing like what my bedroom looks like. And then I wrote like a little personal essay. I did some more documentation and self-portraiture as to like what I was just doing, which is basically just like on my computer. Yeah.
What was your mother feeling at that time? I'd see this is great. Is this how you communicated, with notes or?
No, we just talk from the other side of the room.
Yeah.
And surprisingly, she's never gotten it, thank God. Like was never sick, never felt anything. And I would just comfort my dog. But this is like a great project. So I suggest if you haven't seen it, that there's a whole bunch of photographers in this who have beautiful essays. So after that finally ended, after like a couple weeks or so, I was like assigned to go feature hunt. My first assignment actually was to photograph a wedding that was being rescheduled because of coronavirus. And the mom kept saying like finally at like dinner, she was like, "You better get us on the front page." Da, da, da. And I was like, "I don't think so," because I just thought it was just like a normal, like New York story, but it actually made the front page. And this is one of like the first like coronavirus like feature stories.
Did the fact that did you find out if you had coronavirus, and did that affect you in anything when you went to do an assignment, if they'd known you had it?
No, I got the antibody test. It came up positive for it. No, I have like so many N95 masks. A lot of our assignments are mostly outdoors, even for portraiture. I just recently had a COVID test earlier this week on Monday, and it came up negative.
So you had nobody limited you because you had it, thinking that, yeah, okay.
Which was something I was worried about. Like, these are all the things I was thinking about in the moment in time when I had it. I was like, oh my God, like I'm never gonna work again. No one's ever gonna see me. It was all these things.
Yeah.
But basically I've been in New York the entire time since it's happened. And it's a crazy transformation to see like the city that I'm born and raised in just like completely empty, silent. It's like very eerie and weird. This was, so these pictures right now are just sort of me like wandering around throughout like the past like months, just seeing how New York has changed. And it's pretty interesting when you are sort of wandering around where your gut leads you. So I would turn a street and for some reason like my nose would just keep walking that way, and then something would like pop up in front of my eyes, which is kind of like funny how that happens. But this guy, he's a postman. I had just finished like a whole day in Harlem shooting like street scenes there of like what COVID looked like. I found like makeshift test sites and like people selling masks on mannequins, and everyone like trying to make a profit off of this on the streets and stuff, and no one really wearing masks. And this was like early April, so it was like kind of like peak of it.
The people selling masks weren't wearing masks.
Yeah. It was like classic New York. But this guy, he was working a double shift. He was super overwhelmed. He was sitting inside the mailbox, and I walked past him, and I was like, and you always kind of beat yourself up a little bit sometimes, or like bite your tongue, and you're like, ah, damn it, like why didn't I like walk back and take a picture, like when you saw something. And so I like did that, and I walked back, and I told him who I was and what I was doing, and he let me like take the photo. But he was super exhausted. And then sometimes I would ask my editors if I could go somewhere, if I could choose where I want to go. So I wanted to go to Coney Island to check out what that was looking like. And I just thought this was like an interesting scene with like the keep far apart sign and the beach. And, yeah, it's like isolation. Also, like, so with coronavirus in the city, like every week something new happened. Like now we're really, really used to it, which is crazy. But like when people were putting plastic bags up to like save themselves, so like for example, Uber drivers would put like plastic bag barriers up in cars to like protect themselves from the passengers. Delis would put up these gigantic plastic bags to like as barriers and stuff. So all these things were like super new to me. And so when this happened, this was like really jaw dropping. And this is like a deli that was next to my house. So also like in the very beginning, no one was really wearing masks. So it's kind of finding like a needle in a haystack. I would like wake up at like 7 a.m., be like going to a whole bunch of different like places around the city, just trying to find people with masks. And these guys I like found and they kissed and I was like, oh, so took a photo.
Excellent, excellent.
Dogs would wear masks. Again, just like I would just wander around and like things that would just like kind of like come out and be really interesting. And I would have harsh deadlines too, like every day, like starting, it depends. Like if I started at 6, I'd have a deadline at like 9, 10, and then another one at 11, and then another one at 2:30, which is like when the paper.
Well, it's interesting you did the dogs with the mask. I think one of the lions got it in the zoo, and when I was photographing the mounted police, they wouldn't let people pat their horses because they were afraid that the people would give the horses COVID.
Mm-hmm.
So when you got these deadlines, these real quick deadlines, you know, you're not long out of school, but you're in the whole era of digital and electronics. How are you sending your material to your editor?
Someone would like take a picture of me sometimes when I'm like filing. It depends. If I know I have a harsh deadline, I'll bring my laptop with me in my like photo bag, and then I'll like literally. And this time too, it was really frustrating because I used to go inside banks, because banks I always felt like kind of very safe to like do this, like have my camera right there, like I'd be sort of next to the ATM. That's what I would always do when I was like photographing parades and stuff, because like the banks would be completely empty. Meanwhile, like Starbucks is like full and all those things, you know. And usually there's outlets. But with this, you couldn't go inside a cafe. You can do anything. So I would like sit like underneath scaffolding sometimes when it was like pouring down rain and like having to file.
Did you use the kiosks at the corners, the Wi-Fi?
No, I used my hotspot, but also
That's
the New York Times gives you like a portable Wi-Fi thing that was like super convenient, and that was really amazing. Yeah.
Okay.
And so
And what kind of files do they require? JPEGs, RAW? I mean, what are you giving them?
So sometimes I have like sort of like a mental shot list before I go out, like sort of what I know I need to get, and from there, when I take photos, I like sort of remember the ones that I like really like, you know, as I'm shooting them. I plan out a time enough in advance that I can like ingest the images, caption them, tone them, and send them without like stressing out about time. I just like select, so like from like say a 400 or like 600 amount of images I'm shooting, I'll choose between like 30 from there, from like a whole day shoot, and then send them.
And are they requiring RAW files at any time from you, or you just
No,
send
all JPEGs.
JPEGs? Okay, that's great.
All my JPEGs are big, so yeah.
So you could almost shove it from your phone, from your camera to your phone, and email it if you needed to.
Yeah, they gave us this new little thing that is really useful. I haven't used it yet, but it basically is like an SD card slash like CF card thing that connects to your phone.
Okay.
But I shoot with XQD cards. I have a Nikon D5, so those are like the Sony ones. So that wouldn't even work for them, but it's okay though. I've gotten so fast at it; it's kind of like unbelievable. And I love like Photo Mechanic and Photoshop are like my two main things. I haven't gone to Lightroom since like sophomore year of college, since William introduced us to Photo Mechanic. So yeah. But this is like another thing, like outdoor dining we're now like super used to. But at this time, it was like crazy to see like people wearing masks and still trying to like enjoy life, but like with these masks, like the mask is like super symbolic. It's super sad going next to hospitals. Sometimes I would have to be like stationed to go photograph outside of like Beth Israel and stuff. And one time I almost got arrested because I wanted to get a better like look of like the big frozen truck. So I like walked up the FDR Drive, not knowing that like I could get like in a lot of trouble, let alone like hit by a car. Right. So this cop saw me and like beeped at me and told me to come down. Like, what are you doing? Da, da, da. And I showed him my pass. I was like, I'm so sorry. But yeah.
He didn't want to do the paperwork.
Yeah. And yeah, streets just like completely empty. Like you never see stuff like this before. That's like a popular scene. I would get assigned to go to like when churches were back open, available to go back in. People were required to wear masks and gloves.
And what length lens are you using here?
This is, I think, a 24 to 70, all the way at 70. I would shoot like a lot with my 70-200.
Because of the distance. That's what I was asking. It did all of a sudden you kind of had to step back and use different lenses than you're used to, I'd assume.
Yeah. I kind of liked shooting with the 70-200. It had like the sort of different effects, but it was really hard to like connect with people, and a lot of people would yell at me. Like some people I would ask if I could take their photo, for example, like the gay couple who was kissing, I'm like right in there, or like the dogs, for example, and stuff like that, and her too. But like sometimes like I would wait, like go photograph like grocery lines and stuff, and people would be like, I know she's not taking my picture, da, 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 just like yelling. And it's because people are stressed out, and no one wants to be remembered by this.
Yeah, but you're also on the streets of New York, so don't worry about it.
I also feel like when you use a 70-200, it feels like more paparazzi / invasive in a way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've had that issue too, because I've used it more, but I like working with, a 35 prime or something and being right in there. And it just, a lot of times here, it's just being selfish and unsafe if you're doing that in a way.
Yeah.
And so trying to figure out like how to communicate with people when you have your whole mask, your face is covered and you have this long like lens in their face, and that was kind of just really trying to like overemphasize some like body language and, be friendly waves and introduce yourself. So,
But also I think it kind of helps show that you're showing respect by stepping back. But because your equipment, you can do it, you can almost make it look like you want it. But our limitations of COVID, you're not on top of her. You'd like to be on top of her, but you're not, and it's COVID, a COVID regulation, photographic COVID regulation.
Yeah,
so it's great. This is wonderful.
This is my mom. I was assigned to go photograph a testing site that was inside a parking lot, and that was also like super weird, like sketchy weirdness, like tons of National Guard people everywhere. All these like doctors dressed in head to toe in PPE. And the only way I could photograph someone getting tested was like if I was in the car. Right. So, and the only way my mom would do it is if I did it. So we both took turns getting tested. And I just drove her, and it hurt. So this shows the pain. I'm forgetting what date. This was like a holiday. I think Memorial Day. One of those holidays, it's like sort of fun. You have like barbecues and stuff. And I was wandering around. I like this because I just like sort of like eye contact that like despite coronavirus, like the things that is sort of like human nature, like the boy staring at the girls and the girls paying no mind and him like flipping around and stuff. So there's sort of like joyful moments. And fashion, everyone was wearing masks.
Yeah.
Outdoor dining, or like at this point, like restaurants were just like completely closed. This is sort of in the beginning of like people like freaking out and like raiding the grocery store. My mom was telling me like she went to the grocery store, like, Brittainy, you have to bring your camera. There's like huge lines. That was like right in the beginning. And so I told my editor that I wanted to go do it. He let me.
Are there, do you do things where, you know, you just said, I told my editor and I wanted to go do it. What if you did it and then gave it to your editor? Do you do that
Um,
at all? Or do you have
I
to
mean,
get it confirmed every time?
well, it depends. Like if I'm like actually like pitching something that like will have text with it, I think um it's important to like talk beforehand. I don't know. I think at this moment in time when I did this, it was like I just told him like, hey, there's really long lines. Like, do you mind if I go shoot and like submit them to the server? It
Right.
wasn't it, and at this time also I was on salary, so it wasn't like now where like if I was to say something like that, it probably wouldn't go through, you know. And then this was like one of the most recent stories that I did. It was about sort of like these jazz concerts that were popping up all around New York, like especially like in November and October. And it was just like nice, bright, you know, feeling of like walking around the city and actually like hearing jazz and music and people dancing and stuff. So yeah. And then this is going to, I did like a lot, like every single day was something like different. This is like going with people who are delivering food to people who don't want to go to the grocery store, who can't. People like knocking on people's doors and like leaving it outside their door, putting it on the doorknob. That was pretty interesting to see. Again, more church stuff. This was a story I did about doormen and how what they were doing to like keep their residents safe. This guy created like a gigantic like spray that's like spits out hand sanitizer essentially at you, and it's like a whole thing. And so they would go through it all the time. And I originally shot this in the daytime, and it looked awful. And I like this was like gonna be like a whole big like photo story because I had like other doormen that I was also documenting, and so I was like, damn, I really need to like go back here. And so I asked him like, you mind if I like redo this? And I put 2 flashes, and so it sort of looks like he's like in space.
It's fantastic. You did a great job. It's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful.
The kid playing like wearing like a gas mask. Another thing, I was just like sort of wandering around different neighborhoods and would see these types of things. Crazy. Kids not being allowed to play in playgrounds and schools being closed. This was a sports story I did about how like an Olympian, like a lot of Olympians weren't allowed to go to the Olympics this year, right? So what they were doing to stay fit and in shape. And this man, his name's Rudy Garcia Tolson. He's a Paralympian and a runner and a swimmer. And so I spent time in his house wearing a mask and like proper PPE the whole time. We spent about like an hour and a half together doing like a day in the life. And that was really sports section. That's all I could think of that are like COVID based stuff. But I'm basically shooting stuff like every day, and it's a lot. It can take a toll on you sometimes.
What do you shoot for yourself? Obviously a lot of this it looks looks great and very personal, but obviously that you are working for the Times and you have deadlines and you have assignments. What do you find yourself shooting that you don't send to the editor or just for yourself?
Some of these weird ones actually I like shoot for myself. Like this one I sent in, but I don't, maybe they used it, but I think some of these weird ones that are like a little off, I kind of shoot for myself like this. I like. Yeah. I was, so last year, like before coronavirus, I've been working on this documentary about virginity auctions, girls that are selling their virginity online for like hundreds of thousands of dollars. I went to Peru in 2019 to document a girl who's selling hers for 400,000, and then Vice was interested in it, and so I was like trying to find New York subjects, and I was finding girls who were in New York, but when I wanted to go meet with them, this is when coronavirus happened, and they didn't want to meet, and so it was just like frustrating. So some of my personal projects have like taken a little bit of a hold. Also working on a project that Traci and William both know that I bumped into my biological father a couple years ago on the subway. I'm working on a piece about that and the reconnection of that incorporates like voicemail and text messages, like old photos and stuff. So it depends. I'm also like, besides freelancing for the Times, I have like other like client work that I do that's more like branded content, like a little bit doc style. So sometimes I'll go to like Boston for like this boxer who wants to have like new branded content for his like whole thing. And yeah.
That sounds great. Wonderful stuff. Really great. You know, this is I love the world and the distance that we're working in. You know, from I graduated RIT in '77 from photo illustration, and totally different world back then. What I'm going to try to get my stuff up here. I document a lot of medical missions around the world and have been all over the place looking at some of the worst stuff in the world. And I was supposed to be in Pakistan working on a water project that I was working with the farmers there. And I was in Cuba in February, came back, and all of a sudden somebody from Iran and somebody from India, I think, were going into the places that we were going to go, and they both were positive for COVID, and that shut that down. And so just coming back from Cuba and then watching Cuba start to be shut down, that wasn't great because I got some really great friends down there that are doing not too good right now. So I was I'm taking a little bit different angle than the both of you, because this was a book from a project that I did out of a whim. I heard the clapping of COVID, which is really big on New York, and I went to 77th and Lex because I heard the noise, and it was all the nurses coming out. And so I photographed for them, and the next day I was working on them on my computer, and I said, well, what the heck, I'm going to print some of these out. And I brought them back the next day, and of course all the nurses were there, the fire department, everybody. You couldn't get into the hospital. It was like Fort Knox. There was so many COVID patients in there. You really didn't want to go in. And I gave the photographs to the nurses, and it just opened up their lives. It was just amazing, the smiles and the coming out of these wards that they're just totally exhausted. And one nurse, before I even started shooting, one nurse was sitting there sitting on a stoop, and I walked up to her and I looked at her and says, "Are you okay?" And all of a sudden she drops her phone and she just looks up and says, "I'm exhausted." And I just, it was she was in one of those private moments. I didn't even pick up my camera to photograph her because of what was going on. I literally went back almost every day for about 14 weeks. And in about the third week, the nursing union, which is about 1,300 members, contacted me and engaged me into continuing the project. And then we produced a book, and it was all about the day in the life of. And if you see these two photographs here with me holding the photographs, I gave them 2,500 photographs, which they then literally wallpapered the inside of the hospital with. So where I'm holding the pictures, literally I gave them 2,500 pictures, and they literally wallpapered the walls of the hospital. And so I had no idea that they were going to want a book until I was into the 14th week. And what surprised me is that I was able to get all of this, that I kept shooting and shooting and shooting and shooting just as a project. And then of course, financially, they started helping me out. But it taught me that when you go into these things to cover as much as you possibly can, because it's not going to be there tomorrow. This is the one on the left is Lenox Hill Greenwich Village, which is where the other part of the nurses go. And I would invite them outside to come out and photograph them, because I was trying to photograph all the nurses. I got about 500 out of 1,300 to do. And then the people on the street were just amazing. At 6:58, there'd be nobody. It'd be like the photographs you were taking of the deserted New York City. There was just nobody there. 6:59, you'd think, nobody's going to come out. At 7 o'clock, it was like they came out of the woodwork, just packed. But amazingly socially distanced. You'd see the traffic on 7th Avenue would completely stop because all the people are standing out in the middle of the street, socially distancing. So that was it was fantastic. And the mounted police would get into it. They would show up with their horses. One time they came with 6 horses, and I've raised horses all my life, and you got to be really careful with noise and everything. Well, they're all standing there, and there must have been 300-400 people around them. And the fire trucks start putting on their sirens, and people start clapping, and the horses just stood there going like, what's all the noise about? They just stood there. It was just amazing. I think his mother worked at Lenox Hill, so he would bring his troop there all the time. The landscape of what I shot, just it changed all day long. You never saw this many ambulances in front. Like if you go to Lenox Hill right now, there might be 1 or 2. There were 7 or 8 ambulances there. So it helped on my background, which was wonderful. And then during this whole thing, the nurses were in the hospital, and outside still went on. The world still went on. They lost a number of people in the hospital, staff and nurses and stuff. And they did a candle walk light with their cell phones around the hospital, and to honor the people that they had lost individually. And then the different crews would come out. And I got to a point where there weren't that many nurses coming out for the clapping. And I started asking, because I started getting to know them and said, what's going on? It says, it's getting better in the hospital, and they're sending home the nurses that were shipped in from other states. So there weren't that many people to come out. So I put up a black background and made a studio on the street. And I invited the nurses into my studio. And that allowed the project to go on a lot further, because I could literally ask one nurse to come out with her whole squad. And they were completely separate from them. Just after a while, just cheering was kind of repetitive, but being able to get them personally and individual. And it allowed for, I'd be shooting on Lexington Avenue right in the bus lane, and the police would be standing behind me with their lights on to keep the traffic. He didn't care about the traffic. He cared about me getting my photograph, which was really fantastic. And then again, the people on the street, this mother and daughter would come out every day. And then yes, nurses do put their guard down, but they were all with people that they were with all the time. And one thing, if they came out with their PPE, they couldn't take it off. So a lot of the times I was just photographing eyes, because if they took it off, then they'd have to go back into the hospital and put all new stuff on, and they didn't have new stuff to put on. So it was very important to pay attention to that. But they got incredible humor, and of course, everything that went on, gay pride, Floyd, I Love New York. This woman here, you can see her glasses are fogged because I did a video of her, did only a small amount of video, but video of her and she's telling me about how she just lost her mother. So there was a lot of those kind of stories in there. So this book has gone to, well, I think we've done about 1,500 copies sold, and each one of the union members got a book. And next week I start on another book for the Greenwich Village Hospital. So that's going to be very interesting I mean, they want a budget, and how do you budget for something that you have absolutely no idea what's going to happen? You know, everything could just shut down again, and it just I won't be able to shoot anything. So I will be going down in there on Tuesday, just filling up cards because I'm going to need it for later on. So that's kind of what I'm doing at this time. And I went around New York doing personal work, you know, taking pictures of empty streets and other people, and always looking for outlets to go in and to work with people who need our help. I think that a lot of the times what I found with here is photographing these nurses gave them a break in the fact that they were in the hospital deciding who gets a ventilator. It's like, that's got to be devastating. You know, I'm sorry you're going to die because I got to save this person because I only have one ventilator. And that's what I was hearing every time I came out, and just handing them a picture from the day before just gave them a little bit of a smile. And then I started getting people chasing after me to get their picture taken, which was even more fun. So, but I'm really, really glad that Dave gave us the opportunity to pull this together around the lens. I've been on different Zooms with him for quite a long time, and we will be doing this a lot more in the future. So we'd love to hear projects that you're doing or ideas for Zooms. This is all visual journalism. So we've got to show our work to get the recognition for it, but also to get the word out as to what's going on in the world. And just between the three of us, and I'm sure that William has some stuff there he's not showing us. I'm sure he's got some cameras working there. I hope he does in the background. But I would love to see more work. I'd love to talk to other people who are shooting and add to it, and go from there. So I'm really happy to see you all, and it's fantastic. And if there are any questions that people have of each other, please email each other, keep in touch. And I
Hey,
thank
before
you
you
for
sign
coming.
off completely, and I'll cut myself out here, but can you just throw a plug in for aroundthelens.com so
Yep.
people can find all the links and everything you talked about? Thanks.
Yep. So from now on, to do more Zooms and to see more of our work is aroundthelens.com. Go there, and all the information is on there. They have Facebook, which if we do a live Zoom, we can link to people, and people watch it live and get the questions coming in. It's always fun, and lots of stuff goes on. So aroundthelens.com. So, and I'm Bruce Byers, and thank you, Traci. Thank you, Brittainy, and William. Thank you very, very much. And Dave, it's really great to do this with you, and I look at doing some more in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.